Hello and welcome to Module 2 of our Angular series. Let's look at what we're going to cover in our session today. We're going to start by revisiting the app routing module, and that's where we left off in the last session. We'll then proceed to further modify our app component, and that modification will include creating a navigation bar, adding router links. We will also learn about an important Angular concept called event binding, important Angular directives like the Router Link Directive, the Router Link Active Directive, the Router-Outlet Directive, as well as the ngIf directive. After we are done with the app component, we will then add functionality to our mission component, our team component, our about component, and our contact component. To begin, if you're working with Windows, just type in your search bar VS Code, and if you see your project in the recent folders and workspaces, you can then select the project, click on it, right, and Visual Studio will open up along with your project. If you don't see it in this list, that's fine, right? You can just type in node.js. And remember, we are not looking for the application. We need the command prompt. Click open, change directory to your project directory, and type in code space dot, press enter, and that will load Visual Studio Code along with your project. Now I already have mine open, so come straight to the app routing module file. And remember, we spoke about how in order to implement routing, we need to make sure that all the components we are using are imported in our app routing module file. We also need to make sure that there's a path included for each component in the routes array. Now you may see more components than you have in your file, but don't worry about that because some of these components are related to later sessions. Okay, what you need is the about, team, contact, checkout, cart, store, mission. Okay, you don't need ship out, log out, etc. Now that we've put in a path for all our components, we can use these paths. And to do that, come straight to your HTML file, the app component HTML that is. What we're going to implement today is a navigation bar. And as part of the navigation bar, we need a button. I'm going to show you how a simple button works. Right, so that's the button tag, and I can write whatever I want here in between, and that's what will appear on screen. So if we go and look at that now, right, that's how the button looks. Okay, but since we're going to be implementing a navigation bar, we want that the user click on an image here, right, and then we have a sort of a menu appearing in what we will call the sidebar. Right, now obviously we need an image, so we need to look for an image, and we just type in menu bar icon. You can do the same, press enter. Remember, click on images. Okay, then tools, usage rights, Creative Commons, and you'll get some results. Now maybe you don't like what you see, then select the themes from above, any one of them, but make sure that your usage rights is set to Creative Commons. Okay, and then select any one of these. You can select round, you can select square, that's up to you. I'm going to go with this one, save image as, and we need to save it in our images folder. But how do we get there? We click on the C drive. Okay, then we click on the users folder, which should be down here somewhere. Click on users folder, click on your username. Then when you look down the list, you should see your project folder. So click on the project folder, click on the source folder, the assets folder, the images folder, and then you can save your file. But remember to change the primary name. What is the primary name? The one before the dot. Okay, so menu bar and save. Okay. Now that we have the image, we need to put in the button. Now this is not the button we need, so I'm going to delete that and we'll put in this button. Okay. Now this button, as you can see, has an image embedded here instead of the words click me, right? And that of course is the image we found just now. So you can put in the name now, menubar.png. Okay, just make sure that when you type in the source, that you specify assets/images, because that's where the image is stored, in the images folder, that is. Right? Of course, we have a styling class for this image, right, which we will use in our CSS file. Now coming to what's within the opening button tag, and this is Angular event binding. So how does it work? The event we want to bind is placed within these braces, and here we are binding the click event. The click event is bound to what's on the right hand side, and that's a function. This function will be defined in our TypeScript file, right? So what happens is, when the user clicks on this button, right, Angular will listen in, of course, for this click event. And when this event happens, or in Angular terms, when the event is emitted, the function toggle click will be executed. So think of this click event as a trigger for the toggle click function to execute. Now coming to the function itself, for that we need to go into our app component TypeScript file. And remember, the last time we looked at the structure of the component, right? We'll just quickly run through that again. So we have the component decorator, which tells Angular that this class is a component. We have the selector, right? And this selector can be used as a tag, just like a button tag that we put in just now. So this can be used as a tag in our view files or HTML files. We will be looking at this, but not in today's session. Then we have the template URL, which is the name of the HTML file and the name of the CSS file in the style URLs. Okay, we have the class itself, and Angular puts in the title as well. Right, so this is all metadata that is put in by Angular. That metadata is related to this component. Now coming to line number 10, right, this line. Now here we are declaring a property. What is a property? A property is like a variable that can hold different types of values. So we can have properties that can hold string values. So for example, I could define a string property, right? Specify it's of string type equal to hello, for example. I could have a number type property, specify it as number type equal to 1, 2, 3, for example. Okay, we could name this X, for example, but for the purposes of good readability and good documentation, we need to name properties so that they are indicative of what they represent. Okay, then, and that's just so that anybody reading your code can understand what is going on. Okay, so therefore string property. Now of course we have a property called show sidebar. And as I said earlier, we are going to be having our navigation bar implemented, and that's going to be like a sidebar. Okay, and therefore show sidebar, and it's going to be of Boolean type. Now, what is the meaning of Boolean type properties? Boolean type properties are properties that can only hold the value true or false at any given time. They cannot hold any letters as in alphabets, they cannot hold alphanumerics, they cannot hold numbers. They can only hold the value true or false. Okay. Now why we have that property we'll come to when we actually look at the function. So this is a function and there's only two lines of code. The first line of code says this dot show sidebar equal to, and then you have an exclamation mark, and the exclamation mark is a not or negation operator. So how this line reads is this dot show sidebar equal to not this dot show sidebar. Now why do we have to specify the word this? That's a keyword in TypeScript, and it is mandatory to use when referring to properties as declared in the class. Okay, so here we are specifying to TypeScript that this property is declared in the class, right? Coming to what this line means then. So every time this function is executed, the value of show sidebar will change. So for example, now it is initialized to false when this function is executed, because we are saying show sidebar equal to not this dot show sidebar, right? It will have the opposite of false. So show sidebar after this line of code is executed or after the function toggle click is executed will have the value true, and then when it's executed for the second time, because the value is true, show sidebar will then have the value false. So this is going to work like a toggle between true and false. Coming to the console.log statement, I said that we would be using the console a lot, right? And we're using this to show how this particular line of code is running. So we will be able to see the value of show sidebar, right, every time this function is executed. Okay, coming back to our HTML file. Why do we have this function? Why are we implementing pick event binding? Right? And the answer to that lies in the next block of code, which is this one. And here you can see we have a nav tag, that's the HTML nav tag, and nav tags along with anchor tags and what are called hrefs, okay, as mentioned here, are used to implement a navigation bar. But remember, we are working with Angular, and instead of href we use router links. And how the router link works is, the router link will navigate the user to this path specified here, and remember this path is linked to a component which is specified in the app routing module file, right? So as you can see, the path about here is linked to the about component, and so when the user clicks on about, which is the link, then router link will navigate the user to the about component. Similarly here, router link will navigate the user to the mission component. So now I hope you understand how the Router Link Directive works. We also have the Router Link Active Directive, and the way that works is it tracks which link is currently active, meaning which link the user clicked on. And as developers, we can use that for styling, and so we specified active here, which will be used as a class in our CSS or styling file, right? We have many break tags in between the links, and that's to provide a carriage return so that this link appears on the next line. Right, so what I'll do is I'll remove this break tag, and then you will understand better what I mean. Now coming to the ngIf directive, the Angular ngIf directive works like this. It will evaluate the condition on the right, and if that condition is fulfilled, then these lines of code within the opening and closing nav tags will be executed. If on the other hand the condition is not fulfilled, then these lines of code will not execute. Right? Now, what does this condition mean? When I say ngIf equal to show sidebar, remember show sidebar is a Boolean type property, and all we are saying here is check if show sidebar is true. So if show sidebar has the value true, then execute these lines of code. If on the other hand show sidebar has a value false, then don't execute these lines of code. Just specifying here show sidebar means check if it is true. If we wanted to say check if show sidebar is false, what would we do? We would just put an exclamation there. So now it would read, if show sidebar is false, then execute these lines of code, and if on the other hand it is not false, meaning it is true, then don't execute. So I hope you understand now how that works. And it needs to be said here that the ngIf directive can be used not only with nav tags, it can be used with other tags as well. We will be doing that in later sessions. The last thing we need to implement or put in to complete the navigation is the Router-Outlet Directive. Okay, and that's all we need to put in, and this completes the navigation. Now, very important to remember is that without specifying router outlet here, Angular routing will not work without the router outlet. Okay. Now you can pause the video to copy this HTML, right? Make sure you've put in all the router links as well as the Router-Outlet Directive, right? Also make sure that your source for the image is correct in terms of assets/images, right? And once that is done, we can then proceed to the styling. In the styling, we already have the H1 styling. We need to put in the anchor tag styling. Here text decoration is none. Why? Anchor tags by default have decoration of their own, and personally I don't like that, so I've removed it. You're free to leave the text decoration as is, and in which case you don't need this property. Then we have color, and as you may know, for color we can do this in Visual Studio Code. Just put in a yellow, for example, right? Select yellow, and once you position your cursor properly, then you'll be able to drag this bar so as to change the color. Okay. Then we have font family. Now font family is appearing in white with a squiggly Y because I don't have a semicolon after that. So put in the semicolon. Then font family, you can choose your own font, right? Select colon and then choose the font you like, right? Select any font you like, put in a semicolon. Line height is 3, and this provides for a vertical spacing between the various links that we have in our HTML file, but I will reduce it to 1, and let's see how that looks, and we can change that later. Padding 10 pixels allows for a little space around the text for these links. Then we have the button tag. Maximum width is 30 pixels, so that's a small button. There's no border on our button. By default, there is a border on buttons, and we don't want the border, so I put in border none. Background is white. Position is fixed. Now there's different types of positions. The default position is static, which means that the element will be placed in the document object model according to the flow of the page. right? So one after the other, right? So I hope you understand what I mean. So if you have a heading tag first, then that will be placed first. Then after that will come the next tag. So if we go back to our HTML file, so we have the heading tag, then after that will come the button tag, below that will come the nav tag, and so on and so forth. That's the flow of the document object model. Now, if for example, we want the element to be fixed in a position, in a particular position, that is, as specified by these offsets like we have here, then we use position fixed. So in this case, we don't want the button to move when we scroll down the page or when we add more elements, right? We also have absolute positioning, which we look at later in the session, right? There is also relative positioning, but relative positioning is almost the same as static positioning unless you put in offsets like this. And finally, there is something called sticky position. Now coming to the styling for the image, again it is fixed, as you can see, and this styling will be almost the same as this one. Why? Because this image, as you know, is embedded within the button, so it's going to behave like the button itself. And then we have the nav tag styling, and in the nav tag, I think now you're familiar with these, right? Margin top, and then maximum width, maximum height, right? So this is going to be a vertical rectangle. And then we have something called box shadow, which is pretty interesting. So this is going to be the color of our shadow, and the values specified here. The first one is the X offset or the horizontal offset. The second one is the Y offset or the vertical offset. Then is the blur radius, and finally the spread radius. So with regards to the X offset, if we put in a positive value as I've done here, then the shadow will appear on the right of the rectangle. If we put in a negative value, the shadow will appear on the left of the rectangle. Similarly, for the vertical offset or the Y offset, if we put in a positive value as I've done here, then the shadow will appear below the rectangle. And if we put in a negative value, then the shadow will appear above the rectangle. With regards to the blur radius, the higher the number that we put in here, or the higher the pixel value, the bigger the blur. So the more blurred will be the shadow. No negative values, by the way, are allowed for blur radius. Then we come to the spread radius, and this is the size of the shadow. So if we put in negative numbers here or negative pixel values, then the shadow will shrink. And finally, we have outline, which will be a border around the rectangle. And last, we have the active styling, and that's related to Router Link Active. So when the user clicks on a link, the link will turn red. Right? So now if you have managed to copy the styling, or if you need to copy it, then you can pause the video, copy the styling, right? If you have already copied the styling, then all you need to do is now compile, right? So to compile, what you need to do is just, if you went through, for example, VS Code, then just go to node.js now, the command prompt, click open, change directory to your project directory, right, and type in ngserve. Press enter and the compilation should begin. If on the other hand you went into your project through Node.js command prompt itself, then just come back to your Node.js command prompt and type in ngserve, press enter, and the compilation should begin. Right? Once the compilation is done, you can then go and look at our handiwork. Right? And there we have the button. Now right click on your screen, click inspect. You will get access to Chrome Developer Tools. Come straight to the console Why? Because we need to see how our toggle click function is working. Now, if you do get an error like this, that's mostly not because you made any mistakes. It's to do with, changing CSS, for example. So in that case, what you can do is just recompile. Okay. To recompile, just press Ctrl C, which will terminate the batch job, and type in ngserve, and the compilation should start. Error connection refused is because I terminated the server. Okay. Right. So now just click on your button. Remember, when we click on the button, what's going to happen? Our click event is bound to the toggle click function. So when we click, the toggle click function will be executed. The show sidebar property has the value false initially, right? So now let's see what the value is, and the value is true. And because the value is true, the ngIf directive has ensured that the lines of code within the opening and closing nav tag are executed, and that's why we see the links. Now, what should happen then when we click again? Now, if we click again, show sidebar should have the value false, and because show sidebar will have the value false, then these links should not appear, right? So that's ngIf directive at work. I hope you've understood that. Now, coming to the look of the navigation bar itself, or the sidebar, you can see here that this link has appeared in the same line. Also, this is a bit crowded in terms of spacing. There's no vertical space between the links. So let's go and correct those two things. All we need to do is, in the styling file, change line height to 3, for example. Okay. And in our HTML file, we need to put back the break tag here. Okay, now we don't need to compile because the server is running, and as we make changes, compilation will be done automatically. So come back to your screen, click on the button, and that's what you should see. So I hope at this point you understood the ngIf directive, how it works, how our function, the toggle click function, is working, right? And also how Angular click event binding works, right? Before we go, note how that shadow effect makes our sidebar look as if it is lifted off the page, right? We also have the little border around. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to add functionality to our components, the about, mission, team, and contact. So let's do that. Come back to your project, and we'll start with the about component. So about component HTML, delete the paragraph tag that comes with the component and put in this h4 tag along with this paragraph. And here, as you can see, we have double spacing. You can increase that to triple spacing if you like, right? That's up to you. Once you're done putting the text, and you can put in your own text if you like as well, you can then come to the styling for this component. We just have 2 elements to style. That's the h4 tag, right? And here again, position is fixed because we don't want that heading to move. And we have something called text shadow. Here we have the horizontal offset or the X offset, the Y offset or the vertical offset, and the blur radius. And we are using 3 colors here, which will be placed front to back, meaning black, yellow, and then red. and this gives a very nice effect actually on screen. Now coming to the horizontal offset, the positioning will be 1 pixel away from the text, similarly for the vertical offset as well. As you can see, for the others, the offset is 0. Okay. Blur radius is slightly more for red and most for yellow. Okay, you can see this effect on screen and then change it to something that appeals to you. Okay, and then we have the paragraph tag. Here we are using position fixed again, but we are also using background linear gradient, which will allow us to use 2 colors, and that will give a kind of a blended look of both colors. Border radius 20 pixels will allow this rectangle to have curved edges instead of sharp edges. Right, we don't need these 2 stylings for now. That's for later sessions. You can leave that out. Once you're done with the styling, we can then go and look at the mission component. Now we will also see our Router Link Active Directive at work. Remember, we put in the active styling in our CSS file. So when I click on About, this should change to red, right? Okay, so that's a Router Link Active Directive at work. The Router Link has also worked, has navigated us to the About component, right? This is the linear gradient effect. This is the border radius effect, and that's text shadow effect. And because this is a baked goods company, I wanted a kind of a warm look. Okay, now the other thing to observe here is the router outlet and how that works. So we don't have functionality to go back. Just select the / about, backspace on it, press enter. Okay, and now what we'll do is select the Elements tab, drill down into the body tag, right? And if we scroll down a bit, then expand app root, you should see router outlet there. Now watch this space when we click on the About component. Okay, so we click on About and we scroll down a bit so that we can see. Click on About and you see how that got placed there. Okay, so router outlet is used by Angular to dynamically place the current route. Okay, and if you expand the selector, remember this is the About component selector, you will see the HTML for our About component. Okay, right? So that's how router outlet works. And like I said, without router outlet, Angular routing just will not work. Now we got to move on to the next component. That's the mission component. So come back to your project. Let's now go and put in functionality for our mission component. So here we have the mission component. Again, delete the paragraph that came with the component, put in the heading and then the paragraph tag. And remember, we have 2 break tags again, double spacing. And for this component, we are having 1 image that will appear many times just for decorative purposes. I'm going to take this away for now. We'll put that in later. Why? Because I will show you why we need it. Okay, so now of course we need to look for the image, right? So come back to your browser, and since this is a baked goods store, I will be looking for a cupcake icon. If you're doing a sports goods store, then look for something that's relevant to that. If you're doing a clothing store, then look for something that's relevant to clothing stores. So now this is what I'm going to do. Remember again that you are within images, then click on Tools, Usage Rights, Creative Commons. You get some results. If you're not happy with them, click on the themes, right? And then you will have to make sure that your usage rights are Creative Commons again. So that's important. And then you can select an image from here. Right? So let's say I go with this one. Right click, save image as, and now you should be within your images folder, so there's no need to change that, but do change the primary name. So design for mission, save that. Okay, and once that is saved, then we can put that name in here. Now as you can see, I have design for mission, but the format is different, so I just change that and then copy that across. Okay, for all of them. Control C to copy, remember, and Control V to paste. Now why is this appearing in red? Because I haven't closed this quotes. Right? Remember that that your source should read assets / images / and then the name of the file. Right, so once your image is saved, we need to style the elements, right? So come to your mission CSS file and then we put in the styling. So we have the H2 styling here. There's nothing new, so you should be comfortable with that. Then we have the paragraph styling. Background will make this yellow, of course, and then border radius 5 pixels, which means we will have a really very slight curved edge for all the corners of this square. Actually, this is not going to be a rectangle. And then we're just styling the image tag. We haven't put classes in because all the images will have the same styling. Okay. Once you're done with the styling, remember border radius, right? That gives a circular shape to the image. Okay, so anyway, once you're done with the styling, again, no need to compile. We can go straight away and look at our mission component. So expand app root, scroll down. So you can see router outlet. Currently we have app about there. That's the selector for the about component. Click on mission, right? And you will see that the selector for the mission component has appeared there. And that's your image. Okay, now you can see they're not properly spaced out. So for that, we can use the ampersand NBSP. Just come to your HTML file, put that in, this ampersand NBSP, semicolon. Okay, just give it that little space and repeat it across so that it's between all images. Of course, you can just copy and paste that. You don't need to type it in again. Right, and now if we go and look at that, now we have them spaced out. So that completes the mission component. Now sometimes if you choose an image, which I will show you, you may have like a white space around, right? So let me just show you because you will not understand otherwise what I'm talking about. So let's say I select another image. Let's say I select this one, right? And I'm going to save it as you don't need to do this actually. I'm just showing you what to do if you need to change that color. So design for mission 1. Okay, I'm going to save it as that, right? And I'm going to put that in here. So let's just change this to design for mission 1.jpg. Okay, so I'll change it just for 1 just to show you what that is. So now if I go and look at the screen, right, you see I have this little white space here. Now maybe I don't want that. Maybe I want to make it a different color, and that's easy to do. All you need to do is on Windows, you can just do it with Paint. Click Open. Bring in your file. So File, Open. Make sure you're on the Images folder. Design Permission 1. Okay, click Open. That brings in the image. Then click Home. And you can select from colors here. You can also edit colors. You can slide this up and down, right? Select the color you want. Add that to your custom colors. Click OK, right? And you can have that color there. Now let's say I want to use that color. Then I just click on the paint can and I do this. Now you can see this is a bit patchy in terms of how it is filling it in. In that case, what you can do is click Home and select Edit with Paint to 3D. No need to save, so don't save. It's going to bring in your file anyway. You can select the color you like, right? Then select the paint can and then just do that. You can actually save that. Save as image and save it. We could save it as a JPEG now because we worked with Paint, so we can change the format and let's save that as mission or design for mission 1 and save it. Okay, and then when I look at it on screen, that's how it will look. Right, so this is how you can change colors. Okay, now that does it for our mission component. The next component is the contact component. So come back to your project and let's work with the contact component. So contact component is down here. Come to the HTML file, delete the paragraph, put in this text. As you can see, we have 3 images here, but of course they don't have styling classes. We will just style the image tag. We need 3 images: telephone, envelope, and email. You can put in these names now, right? And then if need be, we can change that. Don't forget to put in the telephone number, the address, and the email ID as well. Now come to your browser and let's look for those images. So we need envelope, icon, right? And again, make sure that your usage rights are set to Creative Commons. Maybe you want a blue envelope, right? And maybe I'm going to go with that. Or maybe I go with this. Right, so save image as, and then save it as envelope dot, and like I said, if you don't remember the format, just click and you will see the format there. PNG, save the file. The next one we need is telephone. Again, make sure that your usage rights is set to Creative Commons, and then select something that you like from here. Again, if you don't like anything from here, then you know what to do. Click on the themes on any one of those, but make sure that your usage rights is set again to Creative Commons, that is, and select anything you like from these. Right click, save image as, make sure you're in your images folder and save it as. Don't forget to change the primary name before saving. And that's all. Right? Okay, and the final one we need is the email icon. Again, make sure that usage rights has Creative Commons. And maybe I want a different color. So orange. Right, and scroll down. I'm looking for the @ symbol. Something like that, or something like this. Right, save image as, and save it as email. Remember not to change the format. And that's all. And now we can put those names in. Right, you have email.jpg, envelope.jpg, or whatever the name you saved it as. And then our images are done. Now we need to style these elements. So we need to go to the CSS file. Okay, and put in the styling for the h2 tag. Again, there's nothing new here. The paragraph tag, the div tag, and the div is fixed here. And the image tag, we don't need these others. Pause the video to copy the styling. Once the styling is done, then we can go and look at our contact component. So come to your browser. Again, we don't need to compile. Click on the button, click contact, right? And that's what you should see. Select the app root or expand the app root, and you'll see router outlet, and within that you should see your selector for the contact component. When you expand that, you should see the HTML for the contact component. Okay. The last component is theme component. Right. So again, come to your project and look for the theme component. Come to the HTML file. And that's the team. Now there's only 3 members on the team. You can just put in these 3 names, or you can put in your own names and your own text. Right, pause the video, copy the HTML. I'm going to remove the div tag. You don't need to do that. I want to show you what happens if we remove it. And then after you're done with the HTML, come to the CSS file. This is the styling for the h2 tag, the h5 tag, the paragraph tag. It's all simple. That's why I'm going through it quickly. There's nothing new here in terms of the properties. Now here we have position fixed as well, or the div, and that's the last element that needs to be styled. These are not for this session. Once the styling is done, and you can look at the theme component, just click on your button, click theme. You can see the Router Link Active is at work. But look how our information appeared. What will happen then is when I click this button again, they'll all move up. And when I click again, they'll all move down. So just following the flow of the document object model. Right? And that's because they have a static position now. Remember, in our CSS file, for our h5 tag and our p tag, we haven't specified position. Right? Our h5 tag and p tag were originally within a div. So I'm going to put that div back now. And of course, it's not enough just to put in the div. We need to style that div, which we have done. Right? And now when we look at it, that's what it will look like. Now, as I said, the position for the div is fixed. So what if we change that now? Let's make it absolute and see what happens. So before we look at it, what is the difference between absolute and fixed position? With the absolute position, I can scroll down the page, right? So I'll have this kind of a vertical scroll bar. With the fixed position, I cannot scroll down the page. Okay, so let's go and look at that now. We change the position. But again, you can see I don't see any vertical scroll bar. Now, why is that? And it's simply because I do not have enough content in the div. Just copy this once more. And now remember, the position is absolute. And so I should see the vertical scroll bar, and there it is. Now with this, we have come to the end of our session for today. I hope you enjoyed the session as much as I did presenting it to you. In the next session, we will work with the store component, and with that, we will then move into the e-commerce part of our application. So I hope to see you next week. Till then, take care, stay safe. Bye.